Good evening. This is a much more intimidating location than the BPL rooms where you could step on and off the podium. Here I keep, anyway, welcome you all. It's really wonderful to have such a big turnout. This is the 6th annual Boston Bike Update. So this is really an important milestone. 6 years ago, I'm not sure we could have gotten this many people, and we certainly couldn't have gotten much of the city 7 years ago. Starting 6 years ago, things have begun changing, and your presence and the city's presence here is part of that. My name's Steve Miller. I'm on the board of Livable Streets Alliance. Some of you may know me as one of the co-founders of Hub on Wheels, and we're really glad to be hosting this city event. But part of that, I want to recognize if there are any elected officials here in the room or their staff representing them, could you raise your hand or stand up? We'd like to acknowledge your presence. Yeah? Okay. Moving right along. This is fundamentally a City of Boston event. It's designed to give the public, there's some very weird noise coming here. Oh, good. Must be my false teeth. Okay. So this event is designed to give the public, the bicycle community, and the advocates, all of us, from every different organization, a chance to directly interact with city officials and to ask questions, to get answers, and to prepare ourselves for what's coming in the coming year. When we do partnerships, we always like to think of ourselves as pushy partners, supportive and yet demanding, working together and yet having a clear vision. So it's our job to keep together, support the city when it's doing great, which it often does now, and push it when we think it can do more. But because this is a city event, it is in fact my great pleasure to now turn the podium over to the director of the Boston Bikes program, Nicole Friedman.
I've ever gotten to a mic where I hadn't had to pull it down a little bit. Well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is Mayor Walsh just called and can't make it. But the great news is we have the mayor's chief of policy here, Joyce Lenehan. She is going to speak. And she just told me in confidence that she doesn't do much public speaking and she might be a little nervous. So give her a huge round of applause and make her feel welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Someone should tell the elected officials that there are a lot of voters in this room, right? If there was one thing we heard on the campaign trail over and over again, it was bikes. You guys were out there in full force, so I thank you for your activism. We heard it loudly and clearly. Mayor Walsh is thrilled to usher in phase 2 of Boston Bikes. The city has made great progress, but we still need to get to world class. I should tell you that during the transition, we had this matrix that we designed to talk about the different policy areas, and we were thinking about it in terms of keep, implement, and dream. And one thing we also heard very loudly and clearly was that Nicole is a keep. So. Biking is an important part of Mayor Walsh's commitment to sustainability and health initiatives. It's critical that the program support all residents of Boston. Low-income residents of our city pay a disproportionate amount of their income for transportation. Ensuring low-cost options, including cycling, helps save money for working families. Biking is a key part of making our economy robust for the century to come. We know cycling is integral to recruiting and keeping talented workers, which is a big priority of the mayor's. They have told us companies want to locate and workers want to live where they can bike safely. In our campaign, as I said, you told us you want safe facilities for cyclists. Mayor Walsh heard you. Expect more cycle tracks to come online in the city, starting soon with the Connect Historic Boston, which will bring state-of-the-practice cycle tracks right downtown. Cycle tracks provide more safety for cyclists, but they also make the streets safer for all users, reducing the crash industries for pedestrians and drivers. World-class cities with cycle tracks have dramatically fewer crashes than U.S. cities. U.S. cities are taking notice. Washington, D.C., New York City, Chicago are all installing cycle tracks. In Phase 2, under Mayor Walsh, Boston will too. Safety is paramount to Mayor Walsh. This year, he wants to see programs to educate drivers and cyclists about how to stay safe. Using lights at night, watching for car doors, or using a helmet all reduce injuries related to cycling. Cars, too, as he said often on the trail, need to learn to drive safely in the presence of cyclists, and we will work to educate drivers as well. Most importantly, we hope to build a city where everyone feels welcome and safe cycling. This program is about making Boston a wonderful place to live, to work, and to play. And thanks for all that you do to that end. Thank you.
And now a word from the Faneuil Hall organization. This is the only formal thing you'll see today, but we have to read this. But for your safety, we need you to take a look and find where your nearest exit is. There's one. There's a couple. Look, it says exit next to them. The main exits are at the back of the room where you entered. There are a couple behind here as well, and I am terrible at this sort of thing. So a couple years ago, we gave out our first annual awards, and we realized every year there are some new and wonderful people that we want to thank for all of their contributions. So I want to bring up my staff, Jenny Duquette, Kim Foltz, Naja Shakir, and our intern, Hollis Bashir, and they are going to tell you about some very special people that have helped out this year.
All right, our first award is going to the Volunteer of the Year, who is a former president of the Massachusetts Bar Association and a trial lawyer at Breakstone, White & Gluck, which donated 160 helmets to Roll It Forward in 2013. Like any superstar volunteer, he wanted to have an impact, so last year he volunteered at several bike giveaways as our helmet station guru. I was a little hesitant thinking, ooh, lawyer working with kids. He was amazing. So he got the kids excited about their new helmets, laughed with them, made sure the helmet fit correctly. It was perfect. This year his firm is donating more helmets, lights, and lock sets. Please join me in thanking Breakstone, White & Gluck for the support and recognizing David White as our Volunteer of the Year. Come on up.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our second award goes to Rookie Advocate of the Year. Our Rookie Advocate of the Year lives in South Boston. He's the founder of Southie Bikes, an upstart neighborhood group which this year organized community meetings for West Broadway. He also helped launch the Boston Bike Party, a monthly social bike ride that seeks to build community while having a blast on bikes. Please join me in congratulating John Ramos, Boston Bike's Rookie Advocate of the Year.
All right, our third award goes to the Organization of the Year. They have been using the bicycle as a vehicle for social change for 30 years. The group has been challenging inequity, oppression, and injustice consistently, long before equity became the buzzword in the bike community that it is today. Their international programs have shipped over 55,000 bikes to community development organizations in the Global South. A little closer to home, their youth programs have provided thousands of young people hands-on, peer-led programs in basic bike maintenance, city riding, and community advocacy. Please join me in congratulating Bikes Not Bombs as our organization of the year.
Hey, that's awesome. You gotta go in front because you're short. Thanks, you guys.
That way. All right, awesome.
All right, that one's a little hard to follow, but I think our unsung hero perhaps can. So our unsung hero has been the Director of Policy and Planning at the Boston Transportation Department since 1997. He was ahead of the curve in advocating for alternative transportation before there really were alternatives. This year, under his leadership, the city finalized its complete streets policy. And a couple of years ago, his brainchild initiative, a little project called Connect Historic Boston, was launched last year. It won a $15.5 million Tiger grant. His work is driven by a commitment to public process. A little insider tip, you'll never find him at a public meeting if it's scheduled during a World Cup or the Ashes cricket finals. Please join me in congratulating Vineet Gupta as our unsung hero of the year.
Welcome everyone to the 6th annual Boston Bikes Update. I'm so glad to have all of you here today. Special thanks to Livable Streets Alliance for hosting, for Joyce Lenihan for stepping in for the mayor. Those are not easy shoes to fill. And most importantly, actually, to all of you. Over the last 6 years, we have done some really challenging work, and without you, the advocates, it would never have been possible. Joyce was telling me that during the campaign, there were 2 advocacy groups that stood out. One was talking about schools, and the other was about bicycles. So great job, and thank you. Your work has not gone unnoticed. I have to say I'm a little bit honored to be speaking here in Faneuil Hall. It's a pretty remarkable place, and I did a little research before I came here about some of the people that have talked here before. We have Susan B. Anthony, women's suffrage, and a cyclist, no less. She said, the bike has done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. Also speaking at Faneuil Hall, John F. Kennedy, put the first person on the moon, started the Peace Corps, a true American hero. We have my personal favorite, Bill Clinton, presided over the best economic times in US history. And we have Barack Obama, Obamacare. And now we have Nicole Friedman. I put in a couple bike racks at City Hall. So quite honestly, not really much change this year at all. It was kind of a whatever year. But we said goodbye to a true champion of cycling, Mayor Menino. He pledged to support cycling, and he delivered. He took Boston from the worst cycling city in the country to one of the best. And more importantly, he coined the phrase, I hope I get this right, the car is no longer king. And I am very excited to welcome in Mayor Walsh, who has pledged his support to cycling and taking the bike program into phase 2. Phase 2 is harder. We have a lot of work to do. And Mayor Walsh, I think he said it best. He says, I want to take Boston from one of the best cycling cities in the country to one of the best in the world. So 2013 was a great year for Boston Bikes. Our ridership officially doubled. I am not even needing to round up this time. We had a 206% increase in ridership since 2007. And I actually think this chart is pretty remarkable. What you can see is that between 2000 and 2007, our ridership hovered right at 1%. That was before we had a program. Once we started Boston Bikes, you can see the needle moved, and the mode share for cyclists, the percent of trips made by bike, steadily increased until today, where we are twice where we were before. We are a top-rated cycling city. Bike Score has rated us number 5 in the country. As I've told a few of you, I've seen our ranking actually as high as number 2. That one was alphabetical. And most recently, many of you know that we are recognized now as a Green Lane Project Focus City. We were chosen as one of 6 cities out of more than 100 cities, and we will be followed over the next 2 years as we start to install cycle tracks throughout the city. There were also some really unexpected changes in the world of cycling this year. One that just I would never have guessed, but Lance Armstrong took performance-enhancing drugs. Never could have seen that coming. Closer to home, Boston was rated the number 2 mountain bike city in the country. I don't know how they got that great photo of me. But we do have a lot of work to do. When we talk about great cycling cities, we talk about cities like Copenhagen. Copenhagen has 36% of its trips made by bicycle, and they are going for 50%, 1 out of every 2 trips made by bicycle. When we talk about Copenhagen here, a lot of people are like, that can't happen here, that's Europe, they're different over there. And the truth is, it can. When they started the cycling programs in the 1970s, they were just like Boston. They had very high car ridership in the city, and they made a concerted effort to reduce fossil fuel dependencies and to promote cycling. And now, 40 years later, they are getting ready to have 50% of their trips made by bike. Another great city that we think about, another great place that we think about with cycling is the Netherlands, which I looked it up on Google. The Netherlands is actually not in Copenhagen. The Netherlands has 35 to 40% of their trips made by bicycle. 1 in 3, almost 1 out of every 2 trips in their great cities. Their weakest cities, 15 to 20% of their trips are made by bike. Those are their weakest cities. We don't have any cities in the United States with 15 to 20% of their trips made by bike. And even more importantly, their crash injury rate, their fatality rate, it's 10 to 20% of what it is here in the United States. So where does this leave us? We have some goals that I want to share with all of you. These are our 2020 goals. These are goals that were written into our climate action plan and we've been talking about. And I think we should all focus on these. Number 1, we want to have 10% of our trips taken by bike in 2020. Number 2, we want to reduce the crash injury rate by 50% by 2020, so we make it safer for cyclists in our city. And number 3, we want to be the equity leader. We want to make sure that our programs are for all Boston residents. And number 4, and Joyce is still here, I'd like to have a window with an office, or an office with a window. Our program still revolves around the 5 E's. It always has: engineering, encouragement, education, evaluation. I'm glad I put this on a slide because I always forget one, and enforcement. In Boston, we have a 6th E, equity, that we are committed to, and it's embedded into everything we do. And one of the reasons equity is so important for us is right now when we look at who our cyclists are in Boston, our cyclists are more male, wealthier, and more white than who our Boston residents are. And we want our cyclists to be just like our residents of Boston. So we asked you guys a question. We did our 2013 Boston Bikes End of the Year survey. More than 3,000 of you responded to the survey. And we actually forced you to prioritize initiatives. Because if I didn't force you to prioritize, you would want everything. But when you had to prioritize, you told us above and beyond your #1 priority was bike lanes and cycle tracks, fixing the infrastructure. #2, you told us you want education, educating the drivers, educating the cyclists, educating the pedestrians. And that's what you will see a lot of as we embark on Chapter 2 of the Boston Bikes program. So about infrastructure, to date we have added 82 miles of bike lane in the city. This year alone was actually our best year to date. We had exactly 20 miles of bike lane. And I was very excited. Who here is from Dorchester? Dorchester has a wonderful bike advocacy group, and I was so excited when I realized our 82nd mile was on Adams Street in Dorchester, and we rushed out to get the photo, and then we realized it wasn't there. But we did add bike lanes on Freeport, Ashmont, and we're going to check and see what happened on Dorchester, on Adams. So some of the other bike lanes that we've put in, and we have a lot of buffered bike lanes now, with the help of Masco and Charlotte Fleetwood and Vineet Gupta, we have our first bike lanes in the heart of the Longwood Medical area. We removed about 30 parking spaces in front of the colleges. Morton Street, and on this I owe a lot of credit to the Boston Cyclist Union and to the Mass Department of Transportation, because one day Morton Street got repaved and I got a quick call, can we get bike lanes in? I think we can fit bike lanes, maybe we can fit a buffered bike lane in. That was Pete Stidman, you might know him. A few calls back and forth with the state and we were able to get buffered bike lanes in on fresh new pavement. We entered South Boston for the very first time this year. We added bike lanes on A Street, and buffered bike lane. If anyone can identify that cyclist, I'll be impressed. We added the city's first contraflow bike lane yet on D Street in South Boston. Most importantly, we hope it's the first of many, and this year, we are planning to install our second contraflow bike lane on Hemingway in the Fenway Mission Hill area. Mount Vernon Street, we are in the process of installing the city's second cycle track on Mount Vernon Street. It is half installed, the paint is in the ground. We still have to put in the flexible bollards and a little bit more paint. This is the second of what we hope will be many cycle tracks to come. The next one we plan on working on fairly soon is Westland in Mission Hill area. Brighton Avenue, I think many of you remember that we were doing a federal highway project on Brighton Avenue for things called priority shared lanes. We are in phase 3 of the project. So as you can see, we have the sharrows in the road and we've got the lines next to it. The next thing we have to do is actually install the green paint and see how that goes. Martine Powers from the Boston Globe called it sharrows on steroids. You might be surprised to know that Lance Armstrong took those too. So I want to turn gears a little bit and talk about complete streets. But the other day I was talking to Naja Shacker, my program manager, who you just saw. She's just out of college, so quite young. And I said, I'm really excited. In 2013, we finished our bike network plan of Boston. And I said, you know, we were kicking around for the last couple of years since 2008, and she very graciously told me that in 2008 she was in middle school or something. So I felt really good about myself until I realized that actually in the world of cycling, being called a dinosaur is actually quite a compliment. Massive thighs, scrawny cycling arms. Thank you, Naja. How do I look? Okay, so we did complete our bike network plan of Boston in 2013. It was the product of an amazing public process. We had working groups, Boston Bike Advisory Group, interagency meetings, intra-agency meetings, neighborhood meetings, public meetings. We had many iterations of the plan, and when we finally finished it, what we have is 353 miles of planned bike lane over the next 30 years as part of the 30-year vision. The two hallmarks of the bike network plan include a primary route system of low-stress protected facilities. And these are going to be connecting major transit hubs, major employment centers, downtown, the bridges, linear parks, which for us cyclists are essentially the bike freeways. And we see about 40% or 159 miles of our bike network plan over the next 30 years being these protected facilities. Rounding out the plan is a secondary route network getting to local destinations, schools, local main streets, and that will be complemented with bike lanes and shared lane markings and different facility types. And if you know me well, you know I like to get things done. We have a 5-year action plan, so this network plan will never sit on a shelf. In the next 5 years, our effort is to put in 75 miles of bike lane or bike facility on the street. It says 100 miles there. We've selected about 100 and prioritized 100, knowing that you can't quite get them all in. So we have a long list that we choose from. In terms of facility types, we are using all of the best facility types from NACTO guidelines, AASHTO guidelines, MUTCD guidelines. If I could think of any other acronyms, I would guidelines. But that includes things like bike lanes, shared lane markings, advisory streets, shared streets, cycle tracks, they're all in there. And for our vehicular cyclists, please don't worry, we will still have streets with traffic for you. I didn't make this slide because it has a little bit of some animation on it, but so let's talk about cycle tracks and why this is so important. But Portland did a great study of the riders they have and the potential riders, and this study has been duplicated in many other cities. And what they found is there are 1% of the population are strong and fearless. People like our vehicular cyclists that will bike no matter what the conditions. And that's why for many years we had 1% of trips in Boston made by bike. When you put in bike lanes, you're making the roads better, and you get another layer of people that will ride. And these are the strong and confident people, people that just need a little nudge and a little support, and they will get out there and bike. But all the research shows is there's 60% of the population that is interested in biking but concerned. And these are people that they take their bike on vacation, maybe to the Cape, and they ride the bike path and the rail of the trail on the Cape because it's safe. And if we add safe facilities for these people, we can get them biking. So cycle tracks are shown to encourage these people to ride. And for those of you that aren't familiar with cycle tracks, what they do is essentially reorganize the traffic. So with a standard bike lane, you've got the cyclist between a parked car and the moving cars. And for a lot of people, that's not comfortable. For some people, that's fine. When you add a cycle track, you're rearranging that situation. So you've got your cyclist next to the sidewalk, and next to that is the parked car or a buffer, and next to that is the moving car. And all of a sudden, your cyclist is not right next to a moving car. And this feels dramatically safer to a lot of cyclists. It increases the ridership, and the numbers that are coming out of different cities, San Francisco, Philadelphia, New York City, Washington, D.C., these are US cities, and they're all telling the same picture. Ridership is going up 115% to 266% when cycle tracks are installed. The cycle tracks are also improving safety. And this isn't just reducing crashes for cyclists, but what they're finding is the crash rate is going down for the motor vehicles, for the pedestrians, and for the cyclists. And a big part of this is that the vehicle speeds are going down, and we're reducing the sidewalk riding. We're finding the same thing here in Boston. People want cycle tracks. In the survey I referenced before, an open-ended question about what improvements you'd want to see or tell me about your biking, we had 30% of you, open-ended response, unprompted, say you want cycle tracks. And some of you didn't even know the term cycle tracks. You wanted barriers or buffers or separation. Someone said, don't give me any more bike lanes and gutters. I said, thank you. But some of these quotes I think are really telling. I really want to ride downtown with my girlfriend and my friends, but they're scared to ride in traffic. Please add separated bike lanes. I don't feel safe riding very often in Boston. We hear you, thank you. One of the first cycle track projects you will see come online soon is the Connect Historic Boston project. And Connect Historic Boston is the brainchild of the National Park Service and Vineet Gupta, and the whole concept is to thread together these fantastic national historic sites and travel destinations in Boston, similar to the Freedom Trail. Naturally, I assume that to mean places like City Hall and architectural gems like City Hall and the Government Center offices. With the Connect Historic Boston project, though, you're looking at a circle around the city, Atlantic, Commercial, Stanford, Causeway Streets. And on Atlantic and Commercial, what you will have is a sidewalk-level, two-way cycle track built in on the water side. This is a $15 million grant that was brought into the city called a Tiger Grant that allows us to fully reconstruct and add a sidewalk-level cycle track. On Causeway Street, we will actually have a center cycle track, street level with a built buffer separating the cyclists from the moving vehicles. And one thing we thought really hard about is this is right next to North Station and the TD Garden. How do we make sure that we don't have pedestrians all over the cycle track? And what we said is let's put it in the median. Public Garden, you know that we took this out and we did a public process on it last year. We met with a number of different organizations. We did a public meeting, and we're looking at seeing, okay, what are the next steps? Can we take this back out to the public? Why is this project so important? The Public Garden and the Boston Common area, that's the nexus of all trips for cyclists into and out of the downtown area. And these cyclists are coming on protected facilities like the Charles River Path and like the Southwest Corridor. And really, your network is only as good as your weakest link. When cyclists get to the Public Garden, when they get to Boston Common, they're confronted with these 4-lane roads of busy traffic. And it's confounding to a lot of cyclists. So what the proposal is and what we're working on to see if it's feasible is a 2-way cycle track around the Public Garden. Cambridge Street, we're looking at a 2-way cycle track, hopefully as early as this year, connecting between 2 existing state projects. This would be a street-level, paint-only cycle track with flexible bollards. This is in Allston, an incredible connection that we need to make. East Boston Greenway. East Boston is actually part of Boston, and you'll be happy to know that this year we hired Kim Fultz, who does not coincidentally live in East Boston and has been helping us with East Boston. The East Boston Greenway extension on the Massport property will be completed this year, and we're hoping to finish the City of Boston portion as well very soon thereafter. Other cycle tracks, and these are in all various stages of planning from early concept to funding in place. Summer Street, right in the Seaport area, would be a 2-way sidewalk level cycle track as part of the Crossroads Initiative. Malcolm X, part of the Dudley project. Casey Arboway, you all have worked very hard to make sure cycle tracks are part of that. Mount Vernon Street, we just started a very early concept to actually reconstruct it, so there would be a phase 2 to the existing cycle track we have. Other projects you'll see, we're going to do a pilot with the Fairmount Greenway this year. implementing 2 of their legs with pavement markings and with signage to see how that goes. And other bike lanes, and I had to write these down that we're working on for this year, West 4th and the Broadway Street bridges to get into South Boston, Marginal Street in East Boston, Walk Hill and Walter Hill, Boylston in the Fenway, Mount Friden Park, and a number of others. Our goal this year is 15 to 20 miles of bike lane in the ground this year, which will get us 100 miles if we succeed in Mayor Walsh's first term. New Balance Subway, it continues to exceed all expectations. In 2013, we added 10 more stations. In 2014, we'll add another 4 stations. Hopefully, more stations coming soon. The system is now 140 stations and about 1,200 bicycles. Ridership has done incredibly well. We have had 1.6 million trips taken, 9,500 members, and a number that I think is off the charts. We asked in a survey, and we were asking specifically, tell me about your last trip on Hubway. And we said, did you spend money? 30% of the people spent money. How much did you spend? The average money spent was $39. And if you do the math, that means Hubway users have spent $20 million when riding Hubway. And that's money that's spent locally, that's money that's spent on our main streets. And we even asked, would you have spent this money in this location otherwise? 50% said no. Without Hubway, they would not have spent that money at our local shops. $20 million brought right into local shops. In 2013, we launched the first helmet vending machine in the United States. We are working with our team at Helmet Hub to try to integrate the back-end technology so you can swipe for your credit card and get your bike and your helmet with one swipe of your card. Many of you may have seen, just last week we launched Prescribe a Bike. Doctors at the Boston Medical Center can now actually prescribe a Hubway membership for low-income residents of Boston. $5 gets them a membership. This is actually an extension of our subsidized membership program that we've been having going for years. And it's really interesting. I read an NPR article recently, and I looked at the article and they were saying that there's an equity problem with bike share, and all cities, DC, Boston, New York City, have this problem. And I kind of thought about it. I'm like, how are they linking Boston in here? Because no one talked to me. And I said, that's not our case. We've sold over 900 subsidized memberships to date for Hubway. 10% of the Boston Hubway memberships are subsidized memberships, and it's making a difference. But I can talk till I'm blue on it. I actually want to introduce Jennifer, who is one of our Hubway members. She lives in the Mandela Homes in South Boston. She became a Hubway member when we first launched the program in 2011. She's originally from Kenya. She uses Hubway to get everywhere, and she is a tireless advocate. Come on up, Jennifer.
Yes, my name is Jennifer, and I guess I'm here to balance the equation, equity. So basically, I was fortunate to come across the subsidized bike. And initially I took it, I just wanted to do exercise. But later on, I realized, whoa, I could get anywhere in Boston, wherever I went. And the third phase was, I could save money, so I don't go to anywhere without the bicycle. Last year, I only used the T 3 times. So the And I've been able to go to many places where the bicycle reached that I've never been, even when I drove. So I take the bicycle everywhere. And it's very economic. Last time I used the T, I almost cried because it was very expensive. So I do advocate that Basically, they should continue to reach out to the communities, especially in the Boston. People who live in Boston should really have access to the bicycle. It's very economic. And I also live on the street. My apartment is right on the street on Washington Street, and I can't open my window because it's very polluted. So basically, it was very nice to just look through the window and see people cycling on the street. It just tells me that, you know what, the more people ride the bicycle, the less we have polluted air. So I'm really happy, and I was really happy to see people riding their bicycles during winter. So it just shows that it's, you know, the people participating in the bicycle riding, the numbers are getting greater. And it's become safe for us and healthy. So I asked Nicole to be able to reach out to the communities in Boston, find ways to be able to maybe work with the healthcare centers. Normally what I do is when I'm picking up my bicycle and I find people maybe just reading at the station, I talk to them, I ask them, what is it you want to understand? And I recommend them to think about the subsidized bicycles if they cannot afford, or if I go to see my healthcare professionals, I talk to them, and even on the street, I have to look at who I'm talking to. I ask them, okay, if you can afford it, this is, but if you cannot afford, there is a subsidized bicycle. It's healthy for you, and I'm hoping that in the next 10, 15 years, we'll have maybe our healthcare costs will go down, and we'll be able to save, and we'll be more healthy.
The lesson that we have learned from this program is, look, cycling is universally appealing to all Boston residents. It's our job to make it accessible for every Boston resident, and we are well on our way. Bike parking, we continue to add parking throughout the city. Unfortunately, we've added 1,499 bike parking spots. I was hoping it would be 1,500. With Artists for Humanity, we've added a number of artistic racks throughout the city. And this year, the MBTA just unveiled the Pedal and Park in Ashmont at the T-Stop. Hub on Wheels continues to thrive. Even in the rain, we had 5,000 participants. Our TD Bank Mayor's Cup professional race has become a premier race on the Pro Peloton. It is one of the only races that has equal money and lots of prize money for men and women, about $20,000 for each. Bike Fridays continues to grow, and we're getting an ever more diverse audience in terms of age. This year we launched an East Boston convoy, and I was really skeptical. I couldn't see how they were going to do it, and they come in on the first time, and it's the biggest convoy that we've got. And I thought to myself, that's great, that's the first time. And then the next time they come in, a month later, the convoy is even bigger. Thank you to the East Boston advocates that have made that convoy possible. Circle the City, our partners at Circle the City and the Charles River Conservancy, hats off to them. They pulled off the Blue Hill Avenue Circle the City. It was an outstanding event, and we look forward to working with them, growing the event even more and making it a true institution for Boston. In 2014, one of our initiatives will be a women's initiative to bring down that gender gap. Right now, we have 69% of our trips are made by men. Last time I checked, there were 50% of the city was women. Bike to Market, this is delivered by the Boston Cyclists Union. 816 bikes repaired this year at farmers markets. These are in neighborhoods that have no bike shops. This is the only place to get your bike repaired. A great program. Youth cycling program. I owe so much credit to Jenny Duquette, our program manager. This was a breakout year. She gave youth cycling classes to 5,000 youth in Boston. And this isn't just go stand in an auditorium, wave a helmet around. These are intensive classes, 4 to 8 hours of on the bike classes per kid. And if you really think about what is 5,000 people, 5,000 kids, in each grade in Boston schools, there are 5,000 youth. So over time, if you can hit 5,000 a year, you can hit the entire Boston public school system. And you've actually never seen me read anything in all of these years, but I did want to read a note that we got from Jack O'Brien. He's a phys ed teacher at the West Roxbury Academy, and he hosted a youth cycling program. And he said, look, you see students who couldn't ride and then a week later they can ride. I had one student who jumped up to lead. I was surprised because he had behavioral and attendance issues, but during the bike program he was here 10 days in a row. The rest of the year, he hadn't come to school even 3 days straight. Knowing he had bikes got him in the door. And then he goes on to say, another youngster, he lost so much weight, I asked him if he was playing basketball, and he said, nope, I've been riding my bike, I take the bike everywhere. This youth, by the way, he lost 20 pounds in, I think, about a year. The last program of our community bike programs is Roll It Forward. This one is always special to me. This year, best year to date, we collected, refurbished, and donated 1,000 bikes. This was all Jenny's work, plus her team of mechanics and staff. But think about this. If I were to do 1,000 bikes and try to put them in this room, I would need a room 5 times this large. That's what she was moving, collecting, refurbishing, donating, 5 times the size. But I can talk forever about this program. But it just won't do it justice, so I want to introduce Katana Parker. She's a 19-year-old youth mentor for Artists for Humanity and a youth development and employment organization in South Boston. She's attending Mass Art. She's a yoga instructor, a bodybuilder, and she says a lot of her personal transformation and emotional fitness began when she received a bike through Roll It Forward. So let's welcome Katana Parker.
Hi, you guys. My name's Katana Parker, and I live in Dorchester. I'm a local artist working at Artists for Humanity, and I go to Mass Art. I'm 19 years old. About 2 years ago, my life has changed because I was simply donated a system of pulleys, a bike. Boston Bikes connected with my job of 6 years, Artists for Humanity, to reach out to the youth of Boston. I was one of the fortunate kids to take that opportunity that sooner than later made me more aware of my well-being. Ever since I started biking, I have become more interested in my health, which allowed me to take action and physically and mentally expand. I got healthier, happier, and in shape. I was able to take control over a large factor of my life, which was transporting myself from point A to point B. Biking started with just trying to get places without having to pay any fees. However, I started biking long distances. For instance, I used to live in Milton and go to Bunker Hill, located in Charlestown, and yes, I biked the entire way there and the entire way back. When biking long distances became an everyday habit, I noticed my mood was altered along with my body. I felt lighter emotionally, like I've gotten rid of an enormous amount of stress, and I was noticing a huge change in my muscles. I was getting stronger. This encouraged me to go on a ride whenever I was stressed out, because the side effects were literally breathtaking. If I was mad, I got to kick my legs harder and move faster. If I was sad, I got to distance myself from my everyday hassle and acknowledge the beauty in the world around me that I would often miss if I wasn't cycling and paying attention to my surroundings. Overall, instead of feeling like I was just surviving, I was actually living. It truly amazes me to believe this, but it really did just start with 2 wheels. I craved for more physical activity. Magically, Artists for Humanity hired a yoga instructor who stuck with me for 2 years of her teachings and became one of my closest friends of today. Just last summer, I was sponsored by Arlene McLaren to take level 1 yoga in upstate New York with Baron Baptiste. This was a life-changing experience, and it still amazes me today that this all started with a bike. I now instruct yoga classes for my peers at work because I believe they need the encouragement I too was given. And oh yeah, I just signed up for a Muay Thai class at Broadway Jiu-Jitsu, and that class was amazing. Like, I took it Saturday. It was amazing. As you can see, cycling has given me the power to enjoy and use all my senses to experience the life around me. It was a true beginning of my fitness interest, and I could not be more than thankful that I have had this opportunity given to me from Boston Bikes. Without their donation, I probably would have never considered riding a bike every day, let alone staying fit. I would have continued to remain numb and disconnected to my surroundings because I really did not admire the small details of life, like the pattern on a tree, the color of a flower, the fresh smell of grass, the feeling of rain. Instead, I ran from these things or did not even give them any type of acknowledgement because they did not exist in my comfortable world. I was like a package of meat, cold, numb, and in a secure area. But this all changed when I started biking. I started to realize how the wind felt on the hair of my arms, how tears would come out of my eyes when it was cold. I started to realize that this was my comfortable place, to be human and to use all my senses, to experience the life surrounding me. Because there is life in that tree pattern. There is life in those flowers, and there is life in the wind. But there's no life in that package of cold meat. And thank you guys.
So let's talk about the third pillar of our program. This is the education and behavior element. That survey I keep referring to, the 2013 end-of-year survey. You may have noticed there were a lot of questions about how are motor vehicles driving around you, what are other cyclists doing, what are you doing on bikes, and we're trying to just set a benchmark from which we can gauge our progress. But I asked one question. The first question I asked was, how frequently do you see other cyclists do things like run a red light, cut off a pedestrian in the right of way, yell at a driver or pedestrian? And you guys told me that, look, you see this happen with some frequency. And then the next question I asked was, well, how often do you do these things? How often do you run a red light, cut off a pedestrian, or yell at a driver or pedestrian? And what was fascinating was none of you guys do this ever. So the only logical conclusion I could come to is that every morning cyclists are flooding into Boston from Cambridge and running all of our red lights. With that said, we still have an enforcement program. We are working with the police department. They've given over 1,000 tickets to drivers for things like parking in the bike lane. They also do ticket cyclists. They do give tickets to cyclists for egregiously running red lights at truly dangerous intersections, and we know what intersections those are. This last year, we knew we needed to do something immediately to make it safer for cyclists, and we said, we need a full campaign, but if I want to save lives now as fast as possible and keep cyclists from getting injured, the fastest way I can make an impact is to reach out to the cyclists with 4 key points. You may remember that the year before we came up with the Cyclist Safety Report. We're working with the police department, EMS, Boston Cyclist Union. We analyzed every crash from 2009 to 2012. And we realized there's 4 key points that if every cyclist knows these and follows them, will reduce crashes. 1, stay clear of car doors. And I'll get 3 of these 4 probably, so I'm gonna need help on this one. Number 2, stay out of blind spots, particularly large vehicles. Number 3, follow the rules of the road, yield to pedestrians. And lastly, use lights and use a helmet when you're biking. Those 4 key points will save a lot of lives. But this year, 2014, we want to do more. We want to have an education campaign that reaches drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. We have 2 volunteers that were creative directors at Arnold Worldwide who are volunteering to help put this campaign together, and we look forward to rolling it out quite soon. So in conclusion, I want to say that we've done an outstanding job. We have really turned Boston around from where we were. Chapter 1 is over, and we are now entering Chapter 2, where we say, how can we be a world-class bicycling city? And we'll focus on all the E's, but again, it's three cornerstones of our program. It's going to be safe facilities, bike lanes, and ever more cycle tracks. Number 2, it'll be about an education campaign where we're spreading the words and trying to get drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists to share our roads safely. And number 3, it is making sure that we cyclists are Boston, and we make sure that every single Bostonian feels welcome and is invited to bike. Whoops. Hold on one second. This might not be working. I always want to end by recognizing some people. So when I call you guys out, if you're among these groups, please stand up. Cheryl and Sam Sullivan, are you in the audience? These guys were our leaders of our Bike Friday convoy from East Boston. Stay standing. Thank you so much. Bianca Mathabane, are you in the audience? She is our #1 Hubway fan, and stay up once you're standing. Thank you, she's our most enthusiastic. Zach Roken, a big brother with the Roll It Forward program, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Anyone that's worked for Boston Bikes, current or past, please stand up, and thank you for all your wonderful work. And stay standing. City employees, state employees, government employees that work on bikes, please stand up. Anyone that has volunteered ever for Boston Bikes? Anyone that is a Hubway member? Do we have any Hubway members here? We must have a few. Anyone that is part of a bike advocacy organization, Livable Streets, Boston Cyclists Union, Bikes Not Bombs, Rosie Bike. That doesn't ride a bike, stand up. And I hope my slideshow works here. I always put one slideshow together of what I hope you will not see in Boston, and a few other fun slides. This was an actual tourist picture, and if you look in the background, that was not posed at all. So I have to say, I had so much fun last year at the Q&A period. I've been looking forward to it ever since. It was always my favorite part. So I want to bring up Livable Streets Alliance, who is going to help host our question and answer period.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Nicole, for the update, and Joyce for the remarks, and everyone for their personal stories who came up here this evening. Another round of applause, please. Hi, everyone. everyone. My name is Jackie Douglas. I'm the Executive Director of Livable Streets Alliance, your host this evening. So now is the time, as you can see on the screen, for a chance for you to ask your questions and get them answered by the city. If you haven't already, there's a piece of paper on your seat, and you can write written questions if you'd like, and pass them or throw them over to the ushers in orange shirts who are going to be going around the aisles and picking them up and handing them over. So feel free to write any written questions. We'll also have hand raising. You can also do tutor questions. As you're doing that, I want to take an opportunity to quickly thank a couple groups who have helped make tonight happen. First, our event supporters, A Better City and Solomon Foundation, as well as all Livable Streets members. Thank you. Also, to Faneuil Hall for this event space. Thank you to all the volunteers in the room tonight, as well as all the dozens of volunteers who helped out leading up to this event, as well as Kara Oberg, Livable Streets staff, and all Boston Bikes staff and volunteers as well. So thank you very much. So there are many groups and businesses and people who help make Boston a great city. For tonight, we worked with 5 groups: Mass Bike, Walk Boston, Boston Cyclists Union, Bikes Not Bombs, and A Better City. Thank you all for your great work, and we just also all stood up already, thanks to Nicole, for all those who are already involved in all of these groups. I encourage you, if you're not already involved, to get involved, because together we're going to make Boston the best world-class biking city and walking and transit city. So, we worked with these groups who each worked with one of their members to develop a question. So to kick off the evening, I'm going to welcome up Michelle Gorell from Jamaica Plain, who's going to ask our first question of this evening. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone. It was a great presentation. Really appreciate that. Yes, I live in Jamaica Plain, and I live in Jamaica Plain with my children. And we bike all over the city, and we really, really enjoy biking as a family. It's a beautiful thing. And Boston has gotten better and better for families. We really appreciate the changes that the city has made. But I think cycle tracks could be a game changer for families. I think it could increase the safety and just the riding with your children as a parent is not a terribly relaxing experience. It's a little terrifying sometimes, and I think cycle tracks would really change that, would really improve that. So my question is, right now the city's spending about $1 million a year on bike lanes, but according to the Bike Network Master Plan, building out this network of cycle tracks and bike paths and bike lanes, it looks like it would cost over like $5 million a year to really create that. What strategies is the city working on to increase the funding for bike infrastructure?
Great question. I think it could actually be more like $35 million over 5 years for cycle tracks. A lot of how projects get done in the city, you work with grants, you work with existing projects, you piggyback on existing projects. So as an example, the Connect Historic Boston has a $15 million grant from Tiger. That's one way we do it. Another cycle track in the works is Summer Street in the Seaport area. That is part of a Crossroads Initiative project. It's funded from a variety of sources, and when they redevelop that area, we put the cycle tracks on. So a lot of different sources, and that's how the city gets rebuilt every year. Okay, we got another question.
Hello, everyone. Hey everyone, my name is Abdul Hussein. I'm 18 years old. I go to New Mission High School. I'm a senior. I work at Bikes Not Bombs as a chain reaction coordinator. We have youth programs called BOCA, which stands for Bicyclists Organizing for Community Action. We go out to low-income neighborhoods and we repair people's bikes up for free. We like to make a difference within our communities and see a lot of youth riding. My question to you is, how would you create youth job opportunities for current Boston Public School students that will teach other youth about bike skills, around bike safety and also around bike mechanics.
Great question. So one of the approaches we've taken is different than the Bikes Not Bombs approach, and that's very much on purpose because what you do, nobody could do as well as Bikes Not Bombs does. A strength that the city has is taking programs to scale, but we also want to have impact. So we have our youth cycling program that provides 4 to 8 hours of training per youth on the bike. But then if we have those special kids that really want more training, we'll always send them to Bikes Not Bombs because you guys change people's lives by biking, and we introduce them to biking and teach them how to be safe.
Hi, my name's Christine Giroux, and I volunteer for Walk Boston. And my question is, can you describe how you're planning to educate bikers, walkers, runners, and drivers about the new ways they'll interact as the built environment's changing to provide separate bike facilities? And in particular, can you tell us about the lessons learned from cities like Copenhagen and Amsterdam?
It was actually a little hard to hear. Can I read your notes? That's not going to happen.
Sorry. Can you describe how you're planning to educate bikers, walkers, runners, and drivers about the new ways they'll interact with the built environments changing to provide separate bike facilities? And in particular, can you tell us how cities like Amsterdam and Copenhagen have taught lessons?
Yeah. In terms of education, this is definitely part of our chapter 2, making sure we educate all users of the road. We're looking at a variety of methods. I don't have the answer yet. I will tell you there is no magic bullet. And when you start educating mainstream populations, you need to be very creative. And that's why our experts at Arnold will really help us with that. There will be a transition phase when you start seeing more and more cycle tracks go in the ground. This can be very confusing. Pedestrians walking in the cycle track because they don't know what it is. Cyclists not stopping at lights because they're used to it. We're all going to need to change our behavior, and we're going to need to be very, very smart about it. As we go out and we are asking for more and more space for our cycle tracks, we also have to be more and more responsible, and that means all of us doing much better at stopping on red lights and making sure that we are not making pedestrians feel unsafe. And the number 2 call I get all the time at my office is pedestrians that do not feel safe, that feel like they're almost hit by cyclists. We need to do the best that we can do to make pedestrians and cyclists be on the same team, support each other, and not get in each other's ways. Copenhagen, look, it's all about separation and cycle tracks. It's made it safer, and they've done the separation. With that, I want to introduce Councillor Ayanna Pressley and just give you a chance to say hello. She just walked in. A wonderful and avid supporter of cycling on our city council. Next question.
Thank you, Nicole. Good evening. My name is Essek Petrie, and as a representative of the business community and a bike commuter, I participate in A Better City, which represents over 40 businesses and property owners in the city. Collectively, that has over 85,000 employees. What can the business community, as represented through the TMAs, do to help support the city's bicycling goals and be a bigger part of the discussion? And in turn, what are the ways that the city can leverage our support by engaging with the TMAs?
I love the question. One of the questions we once asked is, what are the triggers that get people to start cycling? And if you ask the question wrong, people say, oh, the environment, I want it to feel better. But when we really drilled down, the number 1 reason people started to bike was they took a new job or they moved to a new location. And to me, that means you businesses are absolutely critical, because you are at the critical moment when people are deciding, I've got my new job, how am I going to get there? We have a bike-friendly business program, and it lists about 20 different things that businesses can do to be bike-friendly. And some of them are very simple. It could be as simple as putting information on your website website about biking, having a couple toolkits in a room that people can use. But then it gets much harder, having showers, having bike cages, having bike share stations. Some get much more expensive, but I'll tell you what, when you do that, the bikers come. If you go into the Longwood Medical area, there's probably 20 or 30 bike cages in there providing protected, covered bike parking, and they're full, hundreds of bikes every day. So just checking off every last thing that you guys can do on that list will make a huge difference in getting people when they are new employees.
Thank you.
So let's do this. Let's open it up to general questions and answers. And we can do this by raising your hand. One thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try to pick on people that I do not know or that are new to the world of cycling as much as we can get them. So who wants to ask the first question? Jessica Mink and then Ethan. That worked well. And here's the rule. You have 30 seconds for your question, and there has to be a question.
It's specific.
Okay, make
The
sure
city, there are at least 3 bike paths that the city could be working on that are city responsibility that have not been moving forward. The South Bay Harbor Trail, the Connecting the Corridors / World Series path, and the Riverway Bridle Path, all of which could be paved, and there's some abutter issues, but nothing's been happening for years on these, and I'd like to ask what you can do to make them move forward.
Duly noted, South Bay Harbor Trail is the most promising and the quickest because the funding is supposedly there. That one is picking up the phone and pushing really hard to get that moving. Let's start with that one. Great comment. Ethan, and then who wants to be after Ethan? Okay, Jasmine. Right. Let's talk about 2 issues. Yes, we probably can do that, and we should reach out on that straight to Boston University to make that happen. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Duly noted. With that said, in terms of safety, 50% of all the crash injuries are 18 to 30-year-olds in the city. So when we want to target cyclists to try to keep them safe, that is the age. When we did our urban cycling campaign, we had 30 partners. Almost all of the universities were partners in the effort, as well as advocacy groups, hospitals. We need to do more of that. Jasmine, you were next. And then who's after Jasmine? Okay.
All right, first I want to thank you for talking about those E's. Those are really important, and the fact that the equity E is infused in all of those E's was awesome, so thank you for that. I wanted to point out that we saw a slide of the results of the bike survey, and there was one part of it that were our priorities as survey takers, which probably many of the people in this room were. And equity was the last priority overall. Yep. So I guess my question is, what do you think? What do we do, and why, and
I wanted to cry. I will be honest. When I asked people to prioritize initiatives, equity was the last one. I like to think that maybe it was how I worded it. For us, equity is so critical. If I were the mayor of the city and I saw a program that serves a sliver of the population, why would I support it? It needs to be about everyone. And what we have seen is biking is universally appealing to everyone. It is our job to make it accessible and to make it welcoming. We didn't care that it was 6. Anyone that I don't know want to ask a question? Over there, and you have 45 seconds, 30 seconds, we will cut you off. I will have my enforcers cut you off, though.
So coming off of winter, my question is, for the cycle tracks that we are getting, what is the plan for snow removal and maintenance during the winter months?
Great question. I don't have the answer. We've done a lot of research into what other cities do. And what I do know is when we put in a cycle track, we will have that answer moving forward before we put it in. We know that snow plows and street sweepers are 10 feet wide. You can use a standard plow and a standard street sweeper if it's 10 feet wide, but each one should have a plan. In other cities, what they do is literally, okay, this one is priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. And then there's even a level of service. Are you removing the snow? Are you pushing it to the curb? Are you using sand? Are you using salt? Oh, new people right there.
As a member of the Watertown Bike Committee, I'm really excited to see all of this. But one of the things I notice as somebody who bikes from Somerville through Cambridge to South Boston and out to Watertown is that all of this is so interregional and intercity. I'm just wondering how Boston, Somerville, Cambridge, Watertown, the rest of us can work together better to make this a more integrated process for the whole area.
That is a great question. Great question, because we work within our borders. When we did our network plan, we did invite and talk with all of the other cities that surrounded us. But a lot of it is just casual conversations. We need something in that city, they need something from us, we'll get it done. A great example that I love is Newton. They were trying to get a little more bike friendly, and I said, I've got an idea, and we installed a bike lane on Beacon Street, and it just stopped right at the Beacon border. At the Newton border. And what do you know, a year or two later, there was a bike lane in Newton, one of the first bike lanes they had. It was very exciting. But we can do more. We can work with groups like MAPC and the state and Department of Conservation and Recreation. And we should, because it is a complete network. Right there.
Gotta go ahead and grip it. How you doing? My name is Brandon Ransom. I'm a Roxbury resident, and as a person of color within the city of Boston, I go ahead and I ride up the Southwest Corridor, and you see very few men of color and women of color riding up the paths, Southwest Corridor or whatnot. What is the plan for the city to address people of color and the fact that we're very few within this room right now? If you look around, I mean, we're kind of scant. So what's the plan for that moving forward?
I need help. I need help in getting a summit, getting a group that can help me say, okay, these are the issues, this is what we're gonna do. But it's hard for me to be the primary champion. I need a group that will stand behind me, and I am all in. So please send me an email and we will talk. That'd be great. Hey, we got a couple of questions that came in from writing. Number one, how can we design less confusing intersections? That's a great question. The next question. Intersections are really tough, working over and over and over at the design. I don't have a great answer other than talk to the best designers in the country, in the world, when we get to something really complex. They are always a challenge, or get rid of all the cars in the street. Okay, what is the biggest limitation for implementing the bike network plan? That is a fantastic question. The bike network plan is one of many plans that our cities face, and we have a lot of competing interests for our streets, some that we also care very deeply about. What about bus transit and bus rapid transit? What about pedestrians? You have a limited width from one building face to another, and how are you going to divide it? Cars aside, there's a lot of competing interests that we all care about, and how do we perfectly well balance those? I think that is our toughest issue, because everyone is on board that we need to change how we are. The car is no longer king, but there's a lot of ways to make sure there's alternative transportation. When do you anticipate Boston's hubway system to be year-round? It could be this year, it might not. I want to still see what works best. One thing I want to look at is, can we keep it open more of the year? Maybe we close January, February. And it really comes down to cost and benefit. In the winter, we'll see maybe 15, 20% of the trips taken by Hubway, but those trips are much, much more expensive. So if we have a limited amount of money, do we want to spend it keeping it open for the small percentage of people that will ride, or are we better maybe expanding and buying more stations? I don't know the best answer, but I do know there is definitely some interest in having it open year-round. Let's go to a live question. Someone on that side that I don't know. How about way back there? Yep.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I just moved here from Atlanta about 3 months ago and have been biking around that city quite a lot for about 6 years. And I found Boston pretty amenable to biking. Like, I'm impressed by the facilities and the off-road facilities and all that, but I found that I was a little surprised by the lack of transitions from like bike paths to the street. And I was wondering if there was any like initiative to help with that.
That's exactly what we do need to work on. We were coming from ground zero when we had 80 feet of bike lane a few years ago. And every year we get into more and more detailed. So looking at those transitions, again, that's a level of detail that we need to get into. And what we've always been trying to do is, okay, in the beginning, where can we have the most impact the fastest? Okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? And you're hitting on one of our next steps, absolutely. Let's stay on that side. How about right there? You guys are doing great on keeping your questions, actually questions. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank you. This is very responsive city government, and the fact that you hold these meetings every year, and I really appreciate it. My question is about delivery trucks that double park on roads where there's a bike lane. And the reason I ask it, I notice it on Commonwealth Avenue, and what happens is there is a delivery service, I think it's the brown trucks, is that UPS? That's pretty good, actually, very often. What they will do, they don't pull off and block the bike lane, they park in the right-hand lane of the two lanes, which means that when they're parked, you can ride basically between two parked cars and it's very safe. But there are many other vehicles, including, by the way, I was told by a driver for Boston University that he did park that way for a while, and he was told by officials at the university, no, don't do it, park over to the right. That's very dangerous because what that does, it blocks the bike lane, it forces the cyclist to veer a little left, and you're getting very close to the fast car lane at that point. Very dangerous. You feel very exposed. And I just wonder if you could make this a bit of a priority. The bike lanes are a great idea, but when there's a delivery truck parked in the middle of it, it obviates the purpose.
Yeah. Great point. I think we do have a lot to do still with double parking, particularly repeat loading zone commercial vehicles. Commercial vehicles theoretically should be among the easier ones to tap into because there's a company to call. Thank you for sort of bringing that back up. How about right in front? I think pedicabs are wonderful. They go through our Hackney division, which is part of the police department that actually licenses actually all of our taxi cabs. And there's right now, I believe, 2 pedicab companies, and every year the number of Hackney or licenses that they have goes up a little bit. I don't know. That's a good question. I believe so. I haven't even gotten into those rules. If you email me, I'll get you an answer, though. How about anyone in the back over on this side? Anyone that I can't see? How about way back there in the red? Or brown or maroon? Whatever color it is, go for it.
Hi. Once a lane is committed to and painted, it looks great. What is the city's commitment to refurbishing that painted lines over the years? Because very shortly, with the winter just like we just had, it deteriorates in a big hurry.
Yep. We're on, actually this is the first year we're going to be doing bike lane maintenance. We are on a 5-year maintenance cycle, and we do have bike lane maintenance funded in the budget. So right now, my poor intern Hollis Brashear and Naja Shakir are out driving 80 miles with a pen and paper, marking every bike lane and where they need to be fixed. So great effort on their part.
Hi, I'm Alana. I run Alston Village Main Streets, and we have a ton of cyclists in Alston. So thank you so much for that. You had a wonderful statistic earlier about how much money Hubway riders are spending in local businesses, which is incredible. In Alston, we have businesses that are fighting to get rid of parking to bring in bike corrals, which is a huge difference from other parts of the city. And what I was wondering is, what's the plan to expand Hubway out into other Main Streets districts and other areas? There are 20 Main Streets in the city of Boston.
Yeah.
How can we make sure that we share the love a little bit?
Right. We actually have a plan. We want to get to every neighborhood of Boston with Hubway. The most effective way to do it is when you go into a neighborhood, you want to go into a neighborhood with some number of stations, 4, 5, 6, because if you don't have enough stations, they won't get used. It's all about maximizing the origin destination combinations. So right now we're in South Boston, Alston, Jamaica Plain, North Dorchester, and Roxbury, and I hope to fill in and then keep expanding. East Boston, I want to get there. That's one of the hardest ones because it's an island, but we can do it, I'm sure of it. How about right there in the orange shirt? For apartment dwellers? We do have some guidelines for developments, and that includes commercial developments as well as residential that requires a pretty substantial number for residential of, I think it's 4 units or above. They need to put in 1 protected, covered bike parking spot per unit as they move forward. That's a lot of bike parking as well as some guest parking. Absolutely, and it's critical. We hear a lot in some of the older units downtown, there is no place to store a bicycle, and bikes aren't even allowed in many of our units. How about there? And we will get to you, don't worry. Is there a question in the back? We'll get to you right after this guy. Hold on.
What is the City of Boston doing to improve wayfinding for residents and visitors who choose to travel by bicycle?
Yeah, I love that question. Wayfinding is changing quite a bit. We did a pilot right downtown with wayfinding. Downtown, if you've been there, it's all one-way streets. I can't even, what'd you say? Wayfinding. Signage. Oh, I see what you're saying, sure. So signage, how to get, in technical terms it's wayfinding, but signage to point where you're going. We looked at downtown and we actually put a number of directional signages saying how to get between different points. And if any of you know, downtown is unbelievably confusing. I don't know how successful it was, to be quite honest. I also don't know the direction that we are going technologically with directions. Is it all going to be online, or how important is signage versus online? I think it's some combination. We are putting up more signs. We just hired a sign contractor. I don't know the best answer though, and I want to look at it a little bit more. I do want to expand the downtown. I promised Bikes Not Bombs back there a question, so go for it.
Hi. My name is JC, and I work with Bikes Not Bombs. And me and Abdul and Jeremy wondering, with all the new upcoming bike lanes being made, how will you keep gentrification from causing people to lose their homes with new bike lanes being made in their communities?
I think I got your question. It's a little hard to hear. Can you say it again?
How will you keep gentrification from causing people to lose their homes with new bike lanes being made in their communities?
Yeah, no, I got it. But it's such a good question. That's the first time I had it. Boy, I wish people realized actually at first that actually house prices go up. We actually sometimes use that as an argument to allow cycle tracks to come into a neighborhood. I have never heard of a city where the bike facilities have been the cause of gentrification. I like to think that if we get bike facilities into a lower income neighborhood, we are making that neighborhood better for the people that live there, and that would be my goal. Make it better for people that live there. One thing I know, if you are low income, a tremendous percentage of your income goes to transportation, and we are seeing with our Hubway subsidized memberships, and we're seeing with our Roll It Forward that people are using their bikes instead of the T, instead of cars, and they are saving a lot of money. So I like to think of it actually as an equity issue, making it better in low-income neighborhoods. And we have a new question that's come in. Which none of these I like. What is the status of the public garden cycle track? We have a lot of process to do. I want to see which way it's going. We still have a concept, and we're looking at, can we take it back out to the public, look at the design again. But I will tell you this, the public garden area, that is the iconic center of our city. Whatever we do in our iconic center, it really has to be not just us cyclists saying, we want cycle tracks here, but it has to be, how are we going to make our iconic downtown public garden better for pedestrians, better for cyclists, and better for all users? If we can answer that with this project, we can get that in the ground.
Hi, I'm Jay. This isn't so much a question as a request. Can you simply make it a priority inside Public Works to make sure that all the storm drain covers are oriented perpendicular to the direction of travel rather than in the direction of travel so my wheel doesn't fall in?
Anytime you see that and you're an IT guy, I was going to say you can call the mayor's hotline, 617-635-4500. For you, go on your little iPhone, because I know you have one, and go to Citizens Connect. Take a quick picture, and it'll get fixed oftentimes within 24 hours. On my BlackBerry, you can't do that. Any questions from way over there? How about right there with the scarf? We'll get you after, we'll go there, and then we'll go up there.
Simple question. Oops, hello? Simple question. That's on. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Simple question. Now that we can show so much economic impact from people riding bikes, when are we going to see bike racks on Newbury Street?
Bike racks on the street?
It's not, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry, some of you did hear me, but I was saying now that we can show so much economic impact from people riding bikes in Hubway, will we actually see bike racks on Newbury Street in the Back Bay and some of those shopping areas that have refused to admit bikers shop as well?
We actually, great question, we actually do have quite a number of bike racks on Newbury Street, on Boylston Street in the Back Bay. We do also have Hubway in those neighborhoods. We install bike racks almost entirely by request. So please send me an email. And what I want in the request, ideally it's a photo, but the street address and the business, and then we can get that in the queue for you. There's a question right up there. You don't get the mic. Yep. You need a credit card or a debit card to access it. One thing that we have as an option that we're trying to push with nonprofits is if the nonprofit can provide the credit card, so someone that doesn't have a credit card can pay the $5 to that organization, and then they use their credit card for it. With the Hubway, why you do that is an identification in case a bike disappears. So that is sort of the security method. So you need someone to vouch for someone else. That does work as well, I believe. I believe so, yeah. Yeah. Ann, I promised you could answer your question. You got 30 seconds though, Ann.
30 seconds. When Boston started, Boston was going after low-hanging fruit and copying others. Montreal had two-way cycle tracks 20 years ago. Lyon had the shared bike long before Boston did. If Boston is going to be a world-class biking city, it needs to innovate, and it has all the inventors in this city to innovate, to have the Chinese bicycle signal that has a countdown number in the middle, to design a much more handsome and Boston-specific delineator post instead of the plastic one, to have solar lighting to light just the cycle tracks, to have wide social cycle tracks or date night cycle tracks, to have plants in between the cycle tracks and the roads to lower mobile source air pollution, to have climate change cycle tracks. We have all the ideas here. When can we move beyond and really become world class?
It sounds like we're not innovating if they've already invented all of those things. But I'll tell you this, one of my philosophies when I started was, look, if I never have an original idea, we can be wildly successful because there are so many models that are ahead. Copenhagen, Netherlands, Amsterdam, same thing. Parts of China, Portland, Oregon, Minneapolis. I think the best thing that we can do for Boston is find out what the best practices are, what works best, put that in the ground, and then if there's something we can add on top of it that's innovative, let's do that too. But let's take the best from all over the world. I'm less focused on being the innovator than putting in the best things I can put in the ground. Let's do, and that doesn't preclude it, but. So it is 3 minutes of 8, so we'll do 3 more questions, and we'll go right there. Well, we'll do one and then the next.
I'm Alex Epstein. I'm from Somerville. I work here in Boston. And I wanted to point out one best practice that is already adopted next door in Cambridge, and that is to use concurrent pedestrian signals, which reduce the amount of time you spend at red lights. And as was pointed out, no one will admit to running red lights, therefore we must not. But I'm sure we'll do it even less when all the pedestrian signals change every 30 seconds, and we can always wait less than 30 seconds. Everyone's patient enough to do that. Thank you.
There is
Will you do that?
a gentleman, award-winning gentleman, in fact, Vineet Gupta behind you, that is the perfect person to answer that question. Translation, we're on it? Was that the answer? Vineet says we are on it. Next question, yep.
Hi, my name is Eric Herod. I'm from Jamaica Plain. I noticed one thing that all of the infrastructure that was on your slide presentation has in common is that although all of it is much needed, it also is all stuff that doesn't really require drivers to make any sacrifices. It's kind of low-hanging fruit. And while I think that's a great first step, I've often noticed one of the biggest challenges to getting anything like, well, I went to some of the community meetings for the Cambridge Street Overpass, which is actually a MassDOT project. The fact that that's managed by the state, even though it's a city street, is kind of another problem altogether. But I noticed that oftentimes the biggest impediment to getting real good infrastructure is not funding, it's getting roadway planners to sort of admit that maybe in order to meet some of our cycling goals for the next decade, we have to say maybe traffic is going to go up a little bit for drivers.
It's a great question, and in fact, when we started, we purposely said, let's pick off the low-hanging fruit and go from there, because when you can build up success after success after success, that paves the way to harder and harder projects. We have hit what I call medium-hanging fruit. Mass Ave, we removed 77 parking spots to add in a bike lane. With Brookline Avenue, we removed about 30 parking spots to make way for a bike lane. Mount Vernon Street, we removed a travel lane. The Atlantic Commercial, that actually was a travel lane, removed when we did that. And there's a lot more to go. And I keep coming back to, the more we ask to remove something from drivers, the better that we need to be at making sure that we are following the rules of the road and making sure that we are respected by the entire community, because it comes back to us every time we go to a public meeting. Why should we do that? They run all the red lights. I don't agree with it, but I need you guys to support me so that when I go into those meetings, they say, they're pretty good people. We should do this for them. We've got one more. Let's do the last question. Yeah, they don't see it that way, though. Trust me. We need to have a really solid backing. Let's do one last question from someone I don't know, and we'll go right there.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I live on Huntington Avenue, and during one of the debates for the mayoral race, they actually showed a camera going right by my house. Should we allow cyclists on these dangerous roads? I cross 3 T-tracks on my commute to one of my jobs. The other jobs, I go over some big dig breaks, and I saw new signs, which was great, but I ride those roads every day, and they're so scary. Is there any plans to address the bike lanes that don't go across the tracks at the optimal angle?
Yep, Huntington is a very, very challenging road. One thing we did successfully in Packard's Corner on South Huntington at Heath Street is play with green pavement markings that actually steer the cyclists in the correct direction, so they're going over at a right angle. It helps somewhat. For Huntington, that's a perfect candidate for a priority share lane. One of the challenges we have there is, again, you've got building face to building face. There's not a lot of room to play with in the short term, and you've got the MBTA right dead set in the center. That one is one of the hardest roads that I think is so important. But the pavement markings, steering cyclists in the correct way over the tracks is key. And that gets back into the point, again, of trade-offs. Public transit is a very good thing. Cycling is a very good thing. How do we coexist so it works for everybody? It can't be one or the other. So it is exactly 8 o'clock. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight for our 6th annual Boston Bikes Update. And I look forward to seeing you all throughout the year.